been watching you, watching me, and I know you want to like, subscribe, and comment. Now I'm playing, but for real, like, subscribe, and comment. Join the conversation. You don't know. All right. Greetings and welcome back once again. My name is Amuna. I pray you are doing well. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new, welcome. And if you're back, you don't know it already. Hit the lights on the way in. Hit the likes on the way in. It took me a while to get back around to this, but I want to know what's going on in Marvin Gaye's life. So if you missed the first two, we're still on chapter 1. This episode is going to finish off chapter 1 of Marvin Gaye life. And so far, it has been rather interesting. So without further ado, I'm going to just go into it because my eye feeling a little blurry today. I was doing something and something accidentally poked me. So, yeah, we're just going to get right into it. Let's go here.
Wyatt Earp and Hey Little Schoolgirl for OK, which was part of Columbia. From the start, Gaye admitted, there was no doubt that he wanted to steal the marquee show. Sharing the spotlight was always painful for Marvin, and in these early years, he resented being simply one of the singers. The group itself was good. Why, then, did their initial recording fail? It may have been due to the unoriginality of their material, and also because of the direction in which Bo Diddley was pushing them. Bo had the Marquis rocking, and the Marquis, as time would prove, would make their mark crooning. They were melodists and harmonizers, and it would take a different kind of producer to push them into the national spotlight. The record failed commercially. Chester Simmons left the group to become Bo Diddley's driver. Gaye's frustrations grew. His pride was wounded. There was no hit song for his father to hear, no money earned. He and Palmer were forced to find menial labor, first as stock boys, then dishwashers at People's Drugstore. I hated Washington, said Marvin, who would later disown the city. The place filled me with a feeling of hopelessness. Nothing happened in Washington. Nothing was made or produced or sold. It was all government, papers, bureaucrats, and bullshit. Here was a city blessed with musical talent and no place to record, no real labels or promoters or distributors.
I think I remember hearing this part. I did rewind it a little bit for those who just joined us. So, what I've realized, even in watching Respect, the docu-series movie on Aretha Franklin's life, is that you can have talent and you can have ability, but if you don't have the right combination of people, marketing, timing, and everything, then you won't bust, and you can get frustrated because it's not happening. And sometimes it can be for years. I think the same similar thing is with the Isley Brothers story. So to hear that Marvin Gaye, today we're like, oh, Marvin Gaye, but that he was going through so much frustration during the time and had to do other things to survive is just very sobering. But let's continue.
By 1958, Gaye and the Marquis were itching for a chance to escape the district. They were ready to play in the major leagues. And with just as much desire, Marvin dreamt of fleeing from his father. The thing with father grew worse by the day. I'd sneak home for a day or two, grab some food or money from mother, and then slip out again. He didn't want to see me, and I didn't want to see him. Mother believed in my singing. Father was waiting for me to fall on my ass. Lack of confidence would always remain one of Marvin's biggest problems. He spent his life looking for his father's blessing. Because the blessing was denied, he could never have enough love. Certain that girls found him strange, as strange he feared as his own father, he hid behind a shyness which, ironically, women found seductive. It was a power that frightened me, Marvin recalled. I didn't know I had it, because to be truthful, it didn't happen by design. I'm a sensualist by nature. As a kid, I didn't really get any girls, but I bragged. I even lied about it. My singing covered up for the action I wasn't getting. It always has. Successfully seducing women was one thing, but satisfying them sexually was another.
You know, they say that the men lie by exaggeration. Let me know in the comment section. And that women lie kind of by omission or minimalizing. So the men is not getting, I think that's interesting to see the ways in which people omit or embellish based on what is expected of them, right? So the man is expected to be able to pull women, so he lies about meeting that expectation, and the woman is expected to be chased, so she lies about her being chased. That's interesting.
Early on, Gaye saw himself as a Superman who was afraid of flying. Yet once established, he felt compelled to maintain his image as the ultimate lover. He convinced himself that it was the only way women would accept him. My sexual technique left lots to be desired. In those days, I assumed that all the other guys knew more than me. I talked big because I didn't want anyone accusing me of being a sissy. It wasn't just about father. It had to do with my brother Frankie. Not only was his sexual apparatus a lot larger than mine, he also had a very good voice.
Did he just say sexual apparatus though? And another thing that leads to emptiness and how people get to start filling their voids with drugs and sex and attention is that you put on this persona, which is what he's talking about. That's not really even you. Only so that you can be accepted by the general public who's not really accepting you, because if they were, then you wouldn't have to pretend. And so even though you may achieve that which you think they want of you, inside you feel empty, right? So it's basically the setup for the okie doke, because when you get to it, it doesn't do what you think it's supposed to, because what you really want is for people to accept you and to love you authentically. And you know, the soul knows that you're being inauthentic. So we can see here how he and many others set themselves up. But let's continue.
His size worried me, and there was no telling how big his talent might be. I was always asking Marvin to let Frankie sing with us, but Marvin never would, Reese reported. He was scared Frankie could outsing him. Gaye suffered from this sibling rivalry. He was frightened that Frankie was not only a better musician, but also a better athlete. He couldn't bear the thought of being bested by his own brother. The tension, though, between Marvin and Frankie was subtle. Both boys were reluctant to discuss it, and years passed without either of them mentioning the matter. It was a sore point for them, but a small one in contrast to the gaping psychological wounds Marvin and father continued to inflict upon one another. To escape the pain, Marvin required outside help, a savior, a man with a plan. That man was Harvey Fuqua. In Marvin's eyes, he appeared to be a combination father figure and musical master. Like Gaye Sr., Fuqua was an ambitious Kentuckian. 11 years older than Marvin, Harvey had been instrumental.
How is Fuqua ambitious like his father? I thought his father was a bum and didn't do nothing. Shout out to those who just joined us in the chat. True Diamond says, this is a tale of a broken man living in a deep dysfunction. That's facts. We need to stop sweeping our issues under the rug. That's what we're here to say. Okay? Prime example of a person who needs help, but how do you escape this madness? And I guess for us, I mean, I think there's value even in just hearing his story, because we can look on and see what he couldn't see because he was too close to it. So even now, when we grow up in a level of dysfunction, we begin to look for surrogates outside of the family home to meet that need. So this is interesting how they juxtapose him against his father and show that this is where a lot of his pain is coming from. And now this person, Fuqua, who I, based on the way, stories go, he may not be the best of characters, but Marvin may not be able to see that. So let's hear this father figure, who's really not, he's really like an older brother, 11 years older, how he's going to come into the story and what he introduced. Nasha, what's going on?
And forging new combinations of sounds and styles in American popular music. Fuqua had a knack for reading trends and moving into the thick of things, especially as teenage music started fermenting in the late 50s and early 60s. He was Marvin Gaye's mentor. He was there at the beginning and at the end, 24 years later, when he co-produced his student's final album, Midnight Love. and sang background on sexual healing. Marvin idolized Harvey. He respected him not only for his string of Moonglow hits, most of all, Seesaw, Please Send Me Someone to Love, but also for the lilting romanticism which characterized the group. Harvey also had guts, Marvin said, and I admired that. He was out there in the world, he'd been around, and I was still in the crib. I was ready for a taste of the big time. I saw myself singing before thousands of women, making them swoon, choosing any one of them for the mere asking. That was my destiny, and the sooner the better.
Marvin, you remember we just read the poor black woman conversation, and some of the men were like, no, that's not what they really feel. And one of the women, I think it was Patricia, what was her name? You guys help me out. She said that, or they said in the letter, the open letter, that a lot of the men only cared about women and fast cars. And here Marvin is over there talking about he want to sing so the women could basically throw their drawers on the stage. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? That's why you took the voice that the creator gave you to come out here so that ladies could throw their drawers at you, Marvin.
By metamorphosing into the Moonglows, Marvin and the Marquis were convinced they'd soon find national fame. It wouldn't be that easy. In November of 1958, Reese Palmer remembered, Chester Simmons, who used to sing with the Marquis, was still with Bo Diddley. Bo and Harvey were on the same bill somewhere up in Canada, and Harvey said he might be looking for some new Moonglows. He was having problems with Bobby Lester, his lead tenor. Naturally, Chester mentioned us, and when the Moonglows came to the Howard Theater that same year, we were ready. Even though he was performing with the old Moonglows, he let us know that right after this gig, they were out and we were in. Harvey was sneaky like that. Between shows, he'd be rehearsing us to death. We thought we were hot shit. But Harvey showed us what real-life five-part harmony was all about. Harvey was a perfectionist, and he brought out the perfectionist in me. One moment, my life seemed helpless. In spite of cutting a record, the Marquis looked like every other group around D.C. I didn't think we'd ever get out. Then one day, this Harvey Fuqua came along. In early 1959, 19-year-old Marvin Gaye left home and headed to Chicago with the newly named Harvey and the Moonglows. I can't say whether it was more difficult saying goodbye to mother or father. I didn't want mother to think I was deserting her. I promised I never would. I wanted to tell father that I wished never to see him again. I wanted to forget everything he'd done to me as a child, but that wasn't possible. We just looked at each other. I think we were both afraid of what we might say. I drove away in Harvey's car. I'd signed with Harvey for life. And I was happy to be leaving, hoping never to come back to these bad, sad memories again.
The thing with that type of abuse is that it follows you. And it's interesting because sometimes children who witness abuse in their household, and especially the male child for his mother, sometimes he wishes that he could intervene, but he's too small to do so. And because to a certain degree, he feels as though he's his mother's protector. And that is what I'm receiving from, the way the story is being narrated, that he's promising her, promising himself that he would protect her from this abuser, right? Which is the father. So he has this conflict that he needs to show him he's better than he is in many ways, right? So he's definitely divided and conflicted on his way to go talk about sexual healing. But let's continue.
Marvin's search for an understanding, supportive father was a source of deep frustration. I thought I had escaped. I thought Father's prison was behind me, Marvin recounted. What I didn't know, though, was that life is about finding different taskmasters. If you want to grow, you got to go up against these tough teachers. Harvey was cool, but believe me, he also broke our balls. Harvey was a little slippery, said Reese Palmer. He'd take me to the side and say, look, I'm going to pay you a little more than the other boys. Then he'd tell each of them the same thing. As far as money goes, We got room and board and not much else.
I knew Harvey was going to be a problem. Didn't I say I'm listening to this for the first time that you guys are, but I just felt in my bones that Harvey was about to be a problem. He's a lot because again, when we have an injury, I think I said this the other day, we look for someone who we think is different, but energetically they're just the same. And because we are in this fight or flight mode and we are triggered, somebody who just looks any little bit different than the way his father was presenting, at first he's going to think it's a good person, but ultimately he attracted somebody who was not a good person. I'm willing to reason that Harvey wasn't the best, but let's listen.
In Chicago, Harvey asked Chuck Barksdale, who'd been singing with the Dells, to join the Moonglows, thus turning the group into a sextet. Fuqua was featured on most of the leads, James Nolan on others, Marvin and Reese sang tenor, and Chester Simmons and Chuck duplicated the bass parts, giving the group an extraordinarily fat bottom. By finding fresh young Moonglows and putting himself out front, Fuqua had what he wanted. The group lived at 57th and Woodlawn, apartments owned by the Chess brothers, the same men who owned the recording label for which the Moonglows recorded. The winter was freezing, made even colder by Fuqua's musical demands. He was a perfectionist, a master craftsman of the art of doo-wop. When it came to business and music, Harvey was as strict as father, said Marvin. He saw me as a pain in the ass. I was always complaining about not singing enough leads. Fact is, if I hadn't been so in love with show business, I'm sure I would have popped him. Marvin wasn't easy to deal with, Reese recalled. And once he and James Nolan got into a fist fight. Another time down in Florida, Harvey and Marvin went after each other.
Remember, if you guys remember earlier, Marvin has a problem with being directed. He tried to enlist, the Air Force. He didn't like the way they was talking to him. He verbally, emotionally abused by his father. So he's definitely going to have a problem with the way in which Harvey at this point is directing him. And furthermore than that, he wants to be at the forefront. And for those who just joined us, we can't listen to it straight through. So, I'm going to have to stop and talk because it's a conversation. So essentially, when we keep having the same experience, sometimes we think it's the other people, but this is a perfect illustration how anywhere we go, there we are. And if the experience keeps happening with different people, not only are we attracting these people, we are the people who are going to be responding in similar ways. So the reality is we're going to start having similar experiences. And again, we're listening to these type of things so that we can see within ourselves or within our own families the issues that may arise. So a lot of people are like, we need therapy. Okay, some people can't afford therapy. Some people can, but we can definitely start somewhere. So let's continue.
But you got to remember that when he wanted to be, Marvin was one of the nicest, warmest cats you'd ever want to meet. He had this low-key ability to make people like him just by being relaxed and natural. He also loved to laugh. Marvin had a lot of sides to him, but his good side was golden. Gaye's drive was unrelenting. He still strove to be the star, and singing simply as one of the boys would never be enough.
Also to remember, like they're saying, he has a lot of sides. We all have a lot of sides, but when someone goes through fractures, sometimes their personalities fracture. When they go through trauma, then our personalities fracture. It may not be as extreme as developing multiple personalities, but the aspects of the trauma, it either gets locked away or it gets channeled in a certain direction that only comes out in a certain environment. And if we can remember, when he went to the Air Force, I believe, he lost his virginity to 3 overweight women. Y'all remind me if I remember correctly. So he doesn't have a good relationship with intimacy. He doesn't gonna have a good relationship with his parental figure. He doesn't ultimately have a good relationship with himself. So let's continue.
He required more attention. His talent, his ego, his charm demanded it. Later in 1959, Harvey and his new Moonglows went into the Chess studios. They recorded That's What Girls Are Made For and Love, I'm So Glad I Found You, which were never released. A while later, Harvey recorded the same songs, this time on his own short-lived label with vocals by the Spinners. The Moonglows did, however, sing on some hits. Marvin Gaye, along with his colleagues, sang harmony on Chuck Berry's irresistible Back in the USA and Almost Grown. Harvey and the Moonglows only recorded a few songs, and Marvin Gaye sang the lead on only one, Mama Lucci, a lively romp written by Gaye and Fuqua. The song had Marvin slipping and sliding, falling from falsetto crescendos, dabbling in wordplay. My Mama Lucci, she's a brand new coochie. When I asked Marvin what the tune was about, he thought for a moment and said, "The perfect mother and perfect wife." Though Gaye had an analytical mind, as a creative artist, he worked instinctively. Only afterward did he become reflective about his creations. In the sound of his voice and the songs he sang, his method was simply to express his true-life feelings. It's telling that, for all Marvin's ambitions to be a balladeer, Fuqua saw the singer's primary strength in dance songs. Gaye had a syncopated pull, a sexy, light-hearted sway. Marvin's future managers would see that same quality and successfully sell it. Time after time, Marvin would be haunted by his inevitable success with sensuous rhythms. Gaye's singing would always be closely tied to the act of dancing, though as an observer, a voyeur, and not as a participant. Marvin hated to dance, though he'd always be inspired by the sight and fantasy of bodies gracefully undulating to the sounds of seductive music.
Yo, did the
Sexually,
did the author say undulating? I have a thing for interesting sounding words. Undulating, eh? Let's go.
and musically, Marvin was being tested. With women drawn to his good looks and smooth manner, he found himself weak before their advances. While he could never approach a girl with great confidence, he was unable to resist when the proposal was directed at him. He toyed with sleeping with 2 women at once, he told me, and then 3. Finally, the question became, how many women can one man please? Throughout his life, Marvin felt sexually obligated to every one of his female fans, a pressure great enough to destroy any man. The irony was that he found himself playing the role of Dionysus, god of indiscriminate sex, when all the while he only wanted to be Apollo, god of song.
You know what's ultimately going to happen. A lot of men, especially when they're younger and they think they're going to be fulfilled, they're giving something, right? So essentially, when you're giving it and there's no reciprocity, or the women are just using you because they want to be in association with somebody who they perceive to have status, and they're not sewing back into your life either because they don't want to or you don't allow them, you're going to be empty, sir. So that's another lie that oftentimes the world tells the men, like, get as many women as you want, but they don't realize they're emptying their soul, right? Because literally when they release, they're releasing parts of them. They're releasing their very essence. And if you keep releasing your essence everywhere, what is going to be left? And that's where we see a lot of brokenness. Well, he's already broken, and nothingness, and vain vanity, essentially. Let's continue.
Marvin was trapped in his own cage of sexual confusion. Extreme by nature, he chose women as the objects of absolute good or absolute corruption. Thus, his fascination with bought love. He also started dealing with the world through the smokescreen of marijuana. That would inevitably alter his perceptions, intensifying both aspects of his personality, his smooth, mellow side, and his sharp paranoia. Reefer is an interesting thing, Marvin once told me in the late 70s as he took a strong toke from the joint he was smoking. He was high during almost all of our interviews. I stay high, Marvin said. I respect reefer. If you're an artist, you'll recognize its creative possibilities.
Did Marvin say he stay high? He stay high. He tried to escape his reality. I just went back to go look when he was born. The interesting thing about when he was born is that he was born on April the 2nd, 1939, and he dies April the 1st, 1984. I don't know, for me, those things are just fascinating. He dies one day before his birthday. Interesting. Anyway, side note. So, yeah, Marvin is over here getting high. Let's find out what's. It's interesting that he deals with. I have a theory. Y'all know I have a lot. Um, what the person may be inclinated towards, or inclined towards, not inclinated, I just made that up, but inclined towards their drug of choice has a lot to do with the areas in which they suffer. So it's interesting that he didn't lean towards alcohol, which affects the liver, and anger affects the liver. He leaned towards smoking, which affects the lungs, which deals with worry, right? So it's interesting to see what he was inclined towards, and what that specific drug affects and how it makes you feel. It gives you a real understanding of where the person was in their mind. But let's continue.
Slowly, you see the world through this fascinating filter, and slowly, you decide you'd rather live your life stoned than straight. You know it's not good for you. You know it'll cause you to make mistakes. But it's too late. You're a pothead. Drugs weren't a part of Gay's childhood.
The other thing about ganja is the way it slows everything down for me. I'm like, nah, bro. Everything is like moving in this very slow motion type of way. Don't ask me how I know. And I'm like, I don't, what goes on in your mind? Maybe those people who are inclined towards it have minds that race, and if of course, if you're not using it for medicinal purposes, but if you, like he said, now you're a pothead, there may be going so much in your mind that you need it to slow down, or you think you need it to slow down. So for me, that's just too much like slow motion.
But part of his initiation into professional music. He experimented with pot only after he hit the road with the Moonglows. His relationship to dope was intense and complex. He started through peer pressure, but soon discovered that smoke, and later coke, gave him an otherworld feeling he found irresistible.
What in all of Whitney Houston, Bobby Brown? Now you gotta go up and you gotta come down. What is that, elevator? See? So now, because you're too slowed down, you probably need something to pick you up. And seeing, and now we have gone down the slippery slope to where in the world are we? Bad combination. And again, this peer pressure, following people to do stupid stuff.
By the end of the 50s, the old musical configurations were changing. The Eisenhower age was ending, and the curtain was coming down on groups like the Moonglows. Different sorts of sounds, from Ray Charles and Jackie Wilson, the Chantels and the Shirelles, were attracting a different generation of teenagers. The Moonglows weren't hitting, and Fuqua knew that something had to be done. The new Moonglows began crazy and ended crazy, said Chuck Barksdale. Even the beginning was leading to the end, though we didn't know it. Here's what happened. Leonard Chess loved Harvey and wanted to help him in any way. Billy Davis, Leonard's A&R man, was going with Gwen Gordy, who had good connections. Leonard thought it was a good idea if Harvey met Gwen, so he set the thing up. Harvey took it from there. We all saw the handwriting on the wall. I suppose Harvey and I are both hustlers, Marvin commented through his Sly Fox smile. We've always had a sixth sense about when to make a move. We've been talking among ourselves, away from the others, about what to do. Going out alone, without the group, seemed right.
Oh
Harvey
boy.
was convinced I could.
Going out alone without the group, it was a setup. Ain't that how they did the Jackson 5? Like, Michael, you don't need Tito and them, Michael. Come on out, Michael. Next thing you know, Michael over there singing Beat It. You feel me? That's how it always worked, divide and conquer.
Be a solo artist. That's why I was ready to follow him to the ends of the earth. Remember, I'd signed with him for life.
What kind of Motown contract is that? You signed with somebody for life, though?
How much I trusted him. Somehow, we wound up in Detroit, just the two of us. The Moonglows had gigged there, and I'd been noticed by a couple of interesting people. Harvey needed me, and I needed him. He was still my guide through the back alleys and over the snake pits. Harvey protected me and taught me about the wild, wicked world out there. He also saw he could make a fortune off me.
Sometimes when you have one abuser and another abuser, in this case the father, Harvey can be an abuser, but because, like he just said, Harvey has a way to get to what he wants, we overlook the fact that Harvey could also be an abuser, right? Because you're benefiting from something that Harvey is doing. In the case of his father, he's not benefiting, right? And that's how we oftentimes overlook abuse and make excuses for abuse. It's not that it's not abuse, we justify it because of the payoff that we're receiving. So that's something to note.
We agreed that with the right push, I could still make it as a Black Sinatra. With Harvey in my corner, I found the guts to step out and try. In moving to Motor City, Marvin was running from a past he needed to forget, straight ahead into a future of great wealth, but even greater pain. Berry Gordy Jr. was the boss. 10 years older than Marvin, Gordy was born into a family of extraordinary entrepreneurs. One of 8 siblings, he'd inherited the restless energy of his light-skinned father, who pursued 4 careers at once.
Did they have to put light-skinned father? I'm not sure how. Maybe I'll wait to see how that plays in. Like, they were entrepreneurs, they were tenacious, and his light-skinned daddy. Like, well, how'd that come into this? Let's continue.
Plasterer, grocer, contractor, and salesman. And his mother, who worked in real estate and politics. I loved Pops Gordy, Marvin said. He had a big heart and a beautiful soul. But Mom Gordy was the real power. She was the forceful lady who ran the show. Like Marvin, Berry Jr. had dropped out of high school. His model had been Detroiter Joe Louis, the heavyweight champ. By 1950, Gordy had boxed his way to a respectable record for a 5'6" flyweight featherweight. Gordy replaced Harvey Fuqua as the major male role model in Marvin's life.
Look at that. Marvin was willing to what happened to Fuqua, Marvin? You just dumped him just like that? Shout out to True Diamond. She says when she was a teen, she tried tweed. That's funny. She was moving in slow motion. Was like, never again. Yeah, that stuff is weird. I don't know. Those teens and adults did it. Yeah, maybe. I mean, everybody's mind works differently. Maybe for people whose minds are overactive and they can't control it, that kind of slowing down. It's kind of like people who talk fast. You want them to slow down. But if you already talk at a measured rate, slowing down is just like, why? You know what I mean? But let's continue.
Gordy had a powerful influence on Marvin, especially as a businessman.
Oh, chill. I didn't even realize we're into chapter 2. So let me make the official distinction. We are now entering chapter 2 of Divided Soul, The Life of Marvin Gaye by David Ritz.
Gaye admired Berry's cunning in the vicious marketplace of pop music. He also viewed Gordy's ability to combine finance and romance as the essence of cool. It took Gordy 10 years, the decade of the 50s, to get down to the serious work of building his empire. He spent 3 years in the Army, returned home in 1953, and opened the 3D Record Mart. 2 years later, the store, specializing in jazz, threw Gordy into bankruptcy. His customers wanted Ruth Brown, not Thelonious Monk. From then on, Berry's musical mind turned toward mass marketing. Although he could neither read nor write music, melodies danced through his dreams, and he was still convinced he could make money in the record business.
Again, this stuff is interesting, especially as being an entrepreneur myself and knowing that it's not easy. Especially in today's time, everybody's an entrepreneur. There's some people who have been at it for a very long time and they're not able to be successful because they haven't found the right combination. So to hear that, Berry Gordy, who became Motown Berry Gordy, struggled in the beginning, even though he was on the right path. He didn't have all of the concepts together to create success, that he didn't give up. And he was able to, to whatever degree he met success, because I heard the Motown contracts was wild. But he kept pushing and was able to see success in his terms. So let's continue.
But how? By 1956, he had 3 children to support and a failed marriage. He took whatever work he could find, helping his father on plastering jobs and working on an automotive assembly line where he slapped chrome trim on the side of Lincolns and Mercurys. Barry couldn't take the assembly line for long. He left his job in July 1957, determined to salvage himself through songwriting. By 1958, he had a hit. Tunes he'd written for his close chum, Jackie Wilson, took off. One song, Lonely Teardrops, was a smash. Significantly, Barry didn't write alone. In a creative environment, he functioned more as editor than initiator. His first tunes were written with Billy Davis, who, under the pen name of Tyrone Carlo, co-composed Teardrops, To Be Loved, That's Why, I'll Be Satisfied, and Ret Petite, all Jackie Wilson hits for the Brunswick label. Gordy was disposed to mix business and love. His new girlfriend, Raynoma, who would become his second wife in 1959, also helped him produce artists on their primitive Webcore tape recorder when they lived at 1719 Gladstone. Meanwhile, Barry kept writing with Janie Bradford, Barrett Strong, Eddie Holland, and his sister, Gwen, who recently became interested in a man who boasted an impressive track record of his own in the music business, Harvey Fuqua. After coming to Detroit in 1960...
Fuqua is back? Wait, sometimes this story be going so fast. Wait a minute. How Fuqua come back? Okay, so he leaves Fuqua to go to Motown, and now Fuqua is back in the picture. Okay, let's see what happens.
Harvey had started a small label. Still pushing his name, he called it Harvey Records and had signed tenor saxophonist Junior Walker, a group called the Quails, and the singer he'd brought from Washington, Marvin Gaye. Everything started coming together, Marvin remembered. Harvey Records hooked up with Anna Records, which belonged to Gwen. Gwen had the Spinners, Lamont Dozier, Joe Tex, and Barrett Strong. It didn't take me long to realize that even though I'd signed with Harvey for life, Barry was about to buy me. Since Harvey needed the cash, I knew it was going to happen. The transaction hurt Marvin, who had looked to Harvey as a true and constant father. But as he did with so many other men in authoritative positions, Gaye couldn't help but fight with Fuqua, even as he hungered for his love and approval. Barry would become the new father. Barry was cool. Barry was cold. Barry was a lot of things, said Gaye. I've always fancied myself as a good reader of people, and I saw right off that after his mom, he was the power. I knew I needed him, and I knew I wanted to stay around. Like Washington, Detroit was fertile ground for music. It was here where the Reverend C.L. Franklin's young daughter, Aretha, had been thrilling the parishioners at his New Bethel church with her impassioned voice.
Listen, and I just watched that Aretha when I wasn't feeling good, because that's the only time I sit down long enough. The Respect. Let me know if you guys saw that with Jennifer Hudson. There's a lot of stuff in there that I had no idea about, like Aretha Franklin getting impregnated, violated, and pregnant at 12, yo. I mean, so much out of that movie. I'm like, wow, her life was wild, but let's continue.
It was also here that Smokey Robinson had been struggling with his vocal group, The Miracles, since 1955. Smokey was convinced that he needed production and promotional help from his close friend Berry Gordy, and was one of the people most responsible for persuading Gordy to finally take the plunge into management. On the royalties earned from Lonely Teardrops and a few $100s borrowed from his family, B.G. began his great adventure into the music business at about the same time young Jack Kennedy moved into the White House. Barry moved his business into a modest house on West Grand Boulevard, which would soon contain offices and a primitive studio. He called the place Hitsville, USA. America wanted a new sound. Youth was in power. Music was changing. Berry Gordy's Motown would not only emerge as a feisty giant killer in a white-controlled industry, it would grow to become the biggest black-owned industry in the annals of American business. Money was the name of the first Motown hit. Money, wrote Berry Gordy, is what I want. In the beginning, Marvin scuffled along with everyone else, hanging out, hanging on. There were a lot of people ahead of me online. That was the real problem, Marvin explained. Smokey, for instance, was not only a good singer and a great writer, but extremely tight with Barry. I couldn't expect to cut in front of Smokey. In early 1961, The Miracles' Shop Around, written by Smokey and Barry, became Motown's first million-selling single. Far as business went, Marvin remembered, Barry had the publishing wrapped up from the beginning. You could write songs in Motown, but you never own any of your copyrights. Barry was a strong businessman who understood that the key to his...
Let me sound out. It was Puffy Daddy. Yo, why he over there doing the Bad Boy? This was Bad Boy before Bad Boy. You don't own the rights to your music. They own it into perpetuity. Like, these were terrible contracts that people were getting into. Terrible contracts.
Personal wealth would be the accumulation of valuable copyrights. You'd get paid as an employee, paid very little, but no one except Barry kept any ownership of the songs. We were all helping Barry build his catalog. Just about everyone got ripped off at Motown, Clarence Paul told me. He was there at the beginning, as a writer, producer, and conductor caretaker for little Stevie Wonder.
Not the open secret. Like, y'all should have put that on the door or something. Like, everybody gets ripped off. Like, the open secret though, and then you wonder why people don't trust. And we talk about, oh, let's do business, and why can't we, as quote unquote black-owned businesses? And then you hear an open secret as someone is exploiting you, and they're doing it in your face, and everybody knows it. So does that make it okay? Like, a lot of this stuff is they claim it's water under the bridge, but it's still the reasons why we have trouble to this day doing business. But let's continue.
The royalty rates were substandard, Clarence claimed. Motown had their own songwriting contracts, which were way below the rest of the industry. Tunes were stolen all the time, and often credit wasn't properly assigned. Barry's way, said Marvin, was to take as much as he could. He wasn't any different from any other businessman trying to make money in music. As far as negotiating goes, he was the master. Somehow, he wound up with everything. I couldn't have asked for...
I'm sorry, what in all of Sean Puffy Love Combs is going on? We saw that happen in our generation. Well, for those who was around during the height of Bad Boy, give me one more chance. Give me one more chance. That's that greed right there.
Better trainer. The early musical decisions were being made by Berry Gordy, who had put together an assortment of musicians responsible for creating what was soon called the Motown sound, a distinguishable, easily digestible, and always danceable recipe for pop success. Gordy's singers were not asked, but told what to sing. Gordy and his producers made the decisions. Marvin would fight that system, and though it would take him a decade, he'd win. The emergence of a Motown sound was not immediate. The initial releases by Mary Wells, the label's first certified star, were tough-minded rhythm and blues Berry Gordy productions in the no-nonsense Etta James tradition. Bye Bye Baby is a classic example. The same is true of the Contours' early screamer, Do You Love Me, sung in the feverish
Do you love me?
There was fresh, vibrant energy,
Sorry.
always a Motown trademark, but no distinguishable style. Barry was an experimenter, Marvin said. He liked to combine styles. I wonder what a Smokey Robinson song, he'd ask himself, and a Smokey Robinson production on Mary Wells would do. Well, my guy zoomed to the top. Barry also liked to play mind games. He was like me and father in that regard, a manipulator who loved stoking competitive fires. You can't imagine what a hotbed of competition that little bungalow on West Graham was like. It was beautiful because we were young and talented and willing to help each other. But people being people, everyone was out for number one. Barry first and foremost. He established himself as king. He owned us. So there was this mad scramble for position. We were all a bunch of ghetto kids looking to break out, and Barry was the cat with the key to the recording studio.
What are you willing to give up? What does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? If poverty wasn't the motivating factor, would these people have chose different?
The object of the game was to get in that little studio. A lot of the girls, like Martha Reeves and Diana Ross, would work in the office just to be close to the studio. I got in by telling them I was a drummer. I really wasn't, but I proved that I really was. I never learned to read music, although all the instruments come easy to me, especially drums and piano. I played drums for all the early acts, but I really wanted to get next to Smokey, because Smokey was next to Barry. That's how I became a drummer for the Miracles, getting paid maybe $5 a session and traveling with them on the road.
$5 a session? What in all of slave prices is this? I know it was 1960, but $5 a session? And it's interesting to know how so many people, like my daughter is self-taught pianist. She plays the piano, but she's self-taught. And I'm telling her, to learn, but she feels the music. She's able to feel the music. Some people are able to feel the music, and some people are able to read the music and play. And I think it's interesting to learn how so many of the people early on could not read sheet music, but they can play. That's something.
I was in. As a writer, Smokey taught me a lot, more as a lyricist than anything else. Smokey has a melodic mind, though if he could play a whole instrument, he really plays only part of the piano. His songs wouldn't all sound the same. Strange that Smokey and I never really wrote together. Anyway, we became friends, close friends, and he helped me. But I needed a little more than professional help. I needed a little personal help with the king. Now, King Barry didn't have one queen. He really had four. His four sisters. They were all real smart chicks. Esther was the oldest and the most educated. She married a politician and had a lot of class. All the Gordys did. And wound up taking care of the artists and damn near running the shop. Lucy was another doll. She came in the office and figured out a way to collect money from the distributors. BG used to say, if it wasn't for Lucy, he'd never be able to keep the doors open. Gwen and Anna were the prima donnas. They had a hell of a reputation for being party girls. They were also fiercely loyal to their brother. I admired that. Fact is, the Gordys were the tightest family I'd ever seen.
Okay, so what do we learn here? They were able to build this multi-empire by being a family who exploited other people, but essentially they work together to exploit other people so that they can be the family on top. If you don't have a collective, cohesive unit with a similar goal, it's going to make it very difficult, not necessarily to achieve success, but to maintain success and to sustain it. Right? There's a lot of people who may become a millionaire on YouTube or whatever. Today, you can become a millionaire in so many different ways, but if you don't have a cohesive unit to sustain, it's going to come and go.
How did the Marvin-Anna romance begin? I know what you're going to say, Gay said to me. You're going to play shrink and say that I really married my mother. Well, you're not the first to hit me with that. When you go with a woman 17 years older than you, people start talking. In the beginning, though, the age difference between Anna and me didn't seem that important.
You see how he was so self-aware? He knew that people are like, okay, you did marry your mother. But sometimes it's not that people don't know or that no one has ever told them that what's wrong. It's that we refuse to accept it, and therefore we dismiss it, as he did in the book. Like, I already know what you're going to say, and I'm going to dismiss it and not necessarily give it any validity. For those who've just joined us, welcome to the conversation. What time is it? We've been running. We are listening to Divided Soul, The Life of Marvin Gaye, written by David Ritz. We are on chapter 2. We're going to go for a little bit more, and then we're going to wind down and come back again. I find this book interesting, okay?
She was 37, I was 20, and still a
What? I'm sorry. The 20-year-old with the 37-year-old? First of all, the lady, unless somebody set her up to be like, hey, I want you to watch over him. What did you see at 37 in a 20-year-old? At this point, even though he's the male, he is not experienced to the degree that he could see if he was being used or exploited. She's 37 years old, marrying or getting with a 20-year-old. Let me know what y'all think. Is that wild or is it me?
Lonely little boy. There was real passion between us.
Oh gosh.
Anna was more experienced than me.
You think?
And I needed a loving teacher. Every man does. From a professional point of view, I have to say, and I hope this doesn't sound too cold, that I knew just what I was doing. Marrying a queen might not make me king, but at least I'd have a shot at being prince. Gaye both relished and resented the situation. The Machiavellian side of his political character was excited by the prospect of moving into the center of power. He followed his instincts and achieved his goal. Anna led him to stardom. In a matter of a few short years, though, he found himself rebelling against Anna's and her brother's authority, just as he would rebel against all authority figures throughout his life. Even more painful than his bouts with his bosses were his constant self-doubts. Because of the critical role Anna and Barry played in Marvin's career, he never believed he could have done it on his own. On the other hand, to the outside world, he appeared cool and confident. Gaye had an ability to mask his uncertainties. For moments, hours, even days, he was able to shed those insecurities and play the part of the suave crooner, displaying the Como, Crosby, Sinatra side of his personality. Marvin's courtship with Anna was further complicated by the effect he had on the young girls in Motown. They were wild for him. Still shy and sexually unsure of himself, he did little fooling around.
I'm still uncomfortable with this whole Anna conversation. Anna, the 20-year-old though? No, sir.
He knew, though, that his popularity with women gave him leverage with Anna. Yet Marvin stayed away from the girls, partly out of fear of losing Anna, and partly because he still saw himself as a one-woman man. He clung to the dreams expressed in the songs of his childhood. Meanwhile, Harvey Fuqua was deepening his relationship with Sister Gwen. There was talk of...
Every time they say Fuqua, I don't know the pronunciation for me. True Diamond says, Pedo Madame's been around. Yeah, that's I don't care who it is. It's male or female. It's weird, bro. It's really weird. Like, you already been through different stages of life. What are you seeing in a 20-year-old?
Of marriage, Gaye still studied his mentor with great care. From Harvey, he learned the principle of combining the personal and professional, a typical Motown motif. By the early 60s, the power in teenage music was falling into the hands of writer-producers. Just as Phil Spector was packaging a sound for the Crystals, just as Carole King and Jerry Goffin were creating the locomotion for Little Eva, Berry Gordy was engineering a half-dozen different trains on a half-dozen different tracks. Barry thought like an oil man, Marvin once said. Drill as many holes as you can and hope for at least one gusher. He wound up with a whole oil field. As a one-time retailer, songwriter, and producer, Gordy had the right combination of experience. At first, he was happy to do a large part of the writing and producing himself. But because his deepest desire was to build an empire, he soon understood that as emperor, he needed time for deliberation. Delegation was the key.
Yep, spreading
Barry
yourself too thin. That's the part I'm learning. You can do a lot of things, but if you spread yourself too thin, you end up doing nothing, because by the time you have to repeat the process, you've been spent, right? So again, yeah, definitely. Let me hear what Barry BG was over there doing. Let's get to listen. Let me see what time this is. We're gonna go about to 20 minutes in, and we have 15:55. So let's continue.
Writers and producers, talents like Eddie and Brian Holland, Lamont Dozier, William Mickey Stevenson, Norman Whitfield, Ivy Hunter, Hank Cosby, and Clarence Paul. He paid them little, challenged them to come up with hits, and pitted them against each other.
Pimping ain't easy. Pimping ain't easy. Did he say he paid them little? What, the $5 again? So you're just not going to pay people for all of their creative work? That's robbery. What's interesting is we say that slavery, not only was it abuse, but it was a great transfer of wealth, intellectual, creative wealth from one party to the next, and the other didn't get compensated. And then later on down the line, because the person looks like us, we willingly allow them to take advantage of us. Part of the problem.
With only a handful of writer-producers, Motown would soon surpass the commercial achievement of an institution as formidable as New York's Brill Building, which, in 1965, housed 165 different music firms. All us producers were in there writing tunes, Clarence Paul explained. VG had this policy: get the tune to the artist it fit. An artist might come by, Marvin or the Temps or Gladys, and hear something in the song they could relate to. That something let them pour themselves into the performance. Barry's way was to get the artist into the studio that afternoon, within the hour, and strike while the iron was hot.
Yeah. So the part about us being very creative, I've been to the studio, right? And if you're somebody who's artistic, how people get you is just like how you say, because artists are kind of like spontaneous. Oftentimes, they get you in the studio, or they play a song for you, or they play an instrumental for you, and all of a sudden you start feeling things. It's like the dude who's trying to push up on you, but he don't want to marry you. He just want to get the front. That's kind of what it's like. And then it's too late afterwards to try to say, hey, I wrote that. Hey, I have rights. And so it's very difficult. But Barry wasn't right. He wasn't right. Because now who gets to prove? There's no contract aforetime. You don't know who wrote what. There's no evidence. And when they actually go register the song for who gets rights, performing rights, mechanical rights, and things of that nature, when you go to register it, the person who's putting in the paperwork can basically write you out of history. Yeah, that almost happened to me, but let's continue.
Now, Marvin was a good drummer back then. Good piano player, too. I used him on most of the early things I did for Stevie. Marvin had more talents than anyone else up there. He was deep. In that early Marvin Gaye review, when he went out on the road with the Spinners and Hattie Little, I used to say, Marvin, you don't want to perform, you want to write. The boss was also pushing Gaye in that same creative direction. Barry knew I could write, Marvin said. He knew I could produce. He saw that from the beginning. But I resisted. I didn't want to be one of the cats behind the scenes. I was determined to get out front. I wound up working on tunes like Dancing in the Streets for Martha and the Vandellas. In those days, even if I did most of the writing and my partners might only contribute a word or a note.
What I told y'all. They'd be like, nah. Put ooh. Just put that right there. Next thing you know, they get 50% writer's credit. Now, the thing with writing is, you have more singers than writers. Like Whitney Houston wasn't a writer. She can sing, but she cannot write. So the writer, just like the instrument player, the composer, without those people, you have no songs, right? There was the lady named Hours and Hours. That lady, I forgot her name now. She was the one who wrote that song. She, comes to find out, wrote a whole lot of songs over the years and was tired of being taken for a ride. Okay, so in the music industry, it's a whole deep dark web up in the music industry, but not everybody can write. But if the singer or someone else is in the room and they say, no, you know what I think I hear ooh, they'll be like, yeah, I wrote that song. And you're like, you did? So let's continue to listen. For those who just joined us, welcome. This is listening and commentary, so don't feel no way if I have to keep stopping. Don't complain in the comment section. Even if you do, I'm just going to let you know right now why it is what it is, okay? We got to change the material.
I'd share the credit with them equally. I didn't have eyes to compose. I was afraid that my writing talent was so great, I'd get distracted from singing. Gaye's egotism, as pervasive as it might be, could be balanced by a cool objectivity. to successfully push his case.
You know, True Diamond, I heard that. I actually met one of the guys. He's a musician who worked on that album. So it's funny that you say that. That he worked on the album and he said the same thing, that Lauryn Hill didn't give credit to those who worked on the album, on that Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. So that's what happens when you go into yeah, it's been going on. When you go into the studio, it's a place of conception, right? It's a place, it can be, if you have a lot stored in you, a magical place, because it's a place where ideas and concept and thoughts and feelings are birthed, right? So for some, like R. Kelly, who set up a bedroom in the middle of the studio, I mean, he was wild, but what he's saying is that this, well, he was off the chain, but this is similar. It's akin, because music is birthed from the same place. Music that move people is birthed from the same place that you create life. You understand? And what happens is that people bring a lot of ego into that space, right? And so when they get caught up in the emotions and the feelings of creating, after they settle back down to reality, afterwards, when it comes to who's going to get the money and who's going to get the rights and how much you're going to get, it's like people arguing over child support. It's like people arguing over what percentage did they contribute, because now the all of the emotion is gone, and now you're down to the money, the hardcore facts, and people get really weird in this space. I mean, it's difficult to say. And one of the things that people often said of R. Kelly is that when he was writing, he would write alone. He would write alone. But that may be attributed to his other issues. But he wouldn't write with a lot of people in the room. And therefore, a lot of people couldn't say, unless he's collaborating, a lot of people couldn't say, you know, that they're the one who did X, Y, and Z. So it's just really interesting, the whole writing process. I've experienced it a few times. And it definitely is a process that would, because you're getting hyped. Somebody plays this and you're like, yeah, you're getting hyped. Next thing you know, and people are like, oh, don't let somebody say this is going to be a hit. Oh boy. And then people start getting greedy and they get the green eyes, it's a wrap after that. And this is how we see that a lot of people come into the music industry and leave broke. Okay.
Case for a splashy Motown singing career, Marvin needed help. He was quick to recognize those best equipped to assist him. Smokey was smarter than I was, he admitted. Not only was he a slicker politician, he wound up performing and writing and making more money than me. I suppose you could say I was stupid. Or maybe it was just that I didn't want to work that hard. Marvin also refused to be treated like the other singers, pawns who performed at the producer's pleasure. I saw what BG was doing, said Gaye. He was trying to get the most out of everyone, like a general training his field sergeants. It was a little like the Air Force, and that was the part I hated. I hated the discipline and all the demands. The more hits Barry had, the tighter he ran the ship.
Yo, True Diamond, you got me laughing today. You know, Five Heartbeats was one of my favorite movies. The Five Heartbeats, I don't know how many times you can't sing like old Eddie Kane. I don't know how many times I watched Five Heartbeats. You remember? Y'all, I'm gonna have to stop this tape. Where we at? You remember when when Eddie Kane gets kicked out the group and he descends into the depths. His conch is all out of shape and he shows up to one of them shows in his old glittery suit. You remember that? And he was all like, zang. He was yo, oh, nights like this, I wish that raindrops will fall. That was my movie. Okay, let me just play a little more.
Barry Gordon, said Rob Cohen, who headed the Motown film division in the 70s, is half teddy bear, half grizzly bear. He's absolutely wonderful or absolutely frightening. You never know which Barry you're going to get. Back in the 60s, though, Barry was doing more than building profits. He had finally nurtured a distinctive sound. I'd attribute the Motown sound to Jamie Jameson's busy bass, said Maurice King. Once King left the Flame Show bar, he became Motown's main maestro, the man in charge of the Supremes' early stage shows, conductor for Gladys Knight and the Pips, and an important musical instructor to all the acts. A silver-haired and distinguished gentleman, Daddy King, as his students called him, explained the creation of the Motown sound as we lunched in Detroit. Jameson was an inventive bassist who gave the instrument a new dimension. None of the arrangers wrote out the bass lines. Jamie improvised, and many of the best charts were built around his improvisations.
All right, we had 20 minutes and 8 seconds. So that's where we're going to stop at. He's finally beginning to go into the direction that he's finally finding his way after practicing and failing and coming into so many groups. He's made his way to Motown, but he's still not satisfied. He doesn't like the teddy bear, Barry Gordy. He doesn't like being told what to do. He still wants to be the lead act, and we are going to continue the next time on Chapter 2, 20 minutes in the life of Marvin Gaye. White True Diamond said, honey, we need to act it out. I'm telling you, yo, me and my brothers, yo, we used to act it out all. Nobody can, you can't sing like old Eddie Kane, right? That actor, I forgot the name of the actor. He was everything. He was everything. When he was on the stage, remember then when they were fighting on the stage and they made it a part of the show? It was everything. Nights like this, I wish that raindrops will fall. It was sad. It's funny, but it's not. But it's sad and it's real. And it's the fate of so many people who were in search of stardom and lost their souls. But so with that said, this light is messing with my eyes. I'm going to have to turn my screen down. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and bearing with me as we go through this story. Hopefully you're learning something that, you know what I mean, gives us something to talk about and learn from. Once again, we on the road to 7K. We on the road to 7K. So if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and share. I see a lot of people just now. I just always feel like I'm ahead of my time. And I've just learned over the years just to keep going. Like, a lot of people now are just watching Color Purple that we did on here. And a lot of the older things that I did like many years ago. So shout out to you. If you're just finding the channel, however you're finding it, the information is there. Have at it. Have at it, y'all. I'm going to play some commercial breaks, and then, tomorrow I might come back with some, I'm not sure, maybe some Umar, maybe some stuff that's going on in the community. I'm not sure. So definitely stay tuned to see what we're going to be dealing with tomorrow. I've been watching you, watching me, and I know you want to like, subscribe, and comment. No, I'm playing, but for real, like, subscribe, and comment. Join the conversation. You don't know? All right. Sorry. So thank everybody for tuning in. We will talk again. Have a blessed night.